Hi, I'm Annalisa,
I'm Maggie.
And I'm Nicole.
and this is Unconditional, the podcast. So welcome back to the latest episode of Unconditional, the podcast, where Nicole, Maggie, and myself, Lisa, are going to talk about how screen time might affect your mental health and how it might not. So I proposed this topic because I have some I have a journey that I'm currently going through around mental health and screen time. But I want to hear first what Nicole has to say, because I think you've got some opinions about this.
Okay, guys. So this is a very hot topic currently. I think especially with COVID taking a lot of things to screens. So we're spending a lot of time on Zoom. We're spending, when you're talking about kids, they're on the computer all day for school, and then most of their homework's electronic. Like, it's a big deal right now. Plus, not to mention, we are a very technologically dependent world at this point. A lot of people get their news that way. A lot of people have, they call like the doom scrolling. So I'm feeling overwhelmed and feeling anxious. And so I'm just going to scroll on TikTok watching organization and dog videos until I feel better. So technology is very well embedded into what we do on a day-to-day basis. And even now, I think for our practice, we're still hybrid. We have virtual and in-person clients. And so, which is great. It's a great opportunity to reach a lot more people, especially if they're not down the street from our office. But at the same time, it still means we're using a screen pretty frequently. And so I'm getting a lot of thoughts for myself, but then also from clients, parents, personal connections that I have in my life of, does this affect our mental health? And then also, what is the extent that it affects our mental health? And so a thought that I had shared with Maggie before we hit record, because it's a classic thing that we do. We start talking because we're heated and we want to get all this stuff out there, and we don't hit record first. But anyway, I was saying that a lot of people have taken it to a more extreme role of, this is the only reason why we're seeing an increase in anxiety, depression, behavioral concerns. And so I really want to open up the question of, like, what are your thoughts on what extent the mental health concerns are affected by screens? I sit in the camp of, I see the effect. I don't think it's the only thing affecting. And there are ways of having more healthy guidelines and boundaries with screens, and especially social media and news on social media and the internet. But what do you guys think?
Well, I think the answer is an unequivocal yes, that screens do impact our mental health, but that doesn't mean, like, I'm not saying it's necessarily bad for your mental health. I'm just saying there's an effect, right? And it has to do with your relationship with social media and screen usage, how much you rely on it to feed certain needs in your life, right? And is it interfering with any domains of your life? And so we could talk about, insert any issue here, right? So what's your relationship with alcohol? Is alcohol bad for your mental health? It depends, right? What about your relationship with sex? How does that affect your mental health? It depends, right? So Yeah, so I'm giving it a definite yes, this matters, but we don't want to move to extremes. We are technologically dependent. Technology brings a lot of wonderful things into our lives, right? But there's the potential for it to harm us as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that screen time affecting mental health goes in conjunction with a bunch of different things. I don't think it's just, someone staring at their phone constantly is going to severely affect them, but there is a difference between those types of people, right? There's a difference between using your phone, as a commodity, looking something up on Google when you have a question about something, which is something we all need to do more because do you ever notice that constantly, like in conversations, you're like, I wonder, what the circumference of the sun is. You can look that up, people. It's right at your fingertips. Use it to your advantage. But anyway, there's a difference between people who use their phone as just a device, right? And then there's those people that are absolutely entranced in it. And, the people that are walking down the street, staring at or the woman walking down down the walkway at the Berkshire Mall and face planting into the fountain when she was on her phone. Look that up on YouTube. Anyway, but yes, I think that it does have an effect, especially like me personally, like over the last few years, I've noticed how much of an effect like too much screen time can have on your mental health. But it's definitely something that comes with other factors.
Maggie, I really appreciate what you said about using Google more often, because I think the three of us sitting in this room right now, we are all white women, right? And we can be better allies if we use Google to our advantage by asking Google the tough questions before we put the emotional work on our Black friends, for example, to teach us more about racial issues. You can also say that about trans issues as well, right? Like, and so even though that's a little separate from the topic today, I just thought that's a really good opportunity to point out that like we really can use Google to like help us in so many different ways, and we can use it to, to be better citizens, to be better allies.
And it's a good point too, to show the benefits of having this access, right? So in our profession, right, we're coming into the room and being able to be there for our clients in a way that they don't have to teach us every single thing that's going on in their life, right? And so we see this in LGBTQ plus affirming care, they don't have to teach us all of the things, right? And so Google Scholar, books, there's digital ones, right? So we're still using screens. But like we do have a lot of access to this knowledge. And so, yes, there is such thing as, the pros and cons of technology, but there are benefits that we want to look at. One of the things I think that comes up is the amount of screen time. So such thing as excessive screen time. And this is again seen a lot in COVID. So it's great that we're having this podcast now, because there are more studies and more articles that are being put out about the effects of excessive screen time, because it was something that we were kind of forced into for a very long time. And so one article in particular from, I think it was from they said it in 2018, but the article itself is from 2021. And it has a focus on social connectedness and excessive screen time during COVID. Talks about the problematic screen time being characterized by obsessive, excessive, compulsive, impulsive, and hastily used. And so that's from Lodha 2018. But like, it's the intense use. So I gave the example to Maggie talking about screen time as I was going through TikTok one day, as all great therapists do in between sessions, and after notes, of course. And one thing that came up is a particular TikToker that I'm so sorry I do not have on hand their name, but they were doing a choose your own character, and in millennial coping skills. And so one of them was screen time. And so it showed the woman looking at her phone, putting it back down, then looking at it immediately again. And so we have like, I see my phone right in front of me right now. And I've definitely had times where I'm like, what time is it? I look, oh, there's an alert. I look at the alert, right? ESPN is going crazy right now. It's preseason of football. And so I'm seeing all the great stuff that's coming up or not so great. And so then I put it down and I'm like, what time is it? Like, I wasn't even looking. And so it can almost feel like a compulsion to look at your phone. And it can become more obsessive. So a topic that comes up with teens and kids, obsessively or compulsively wanting to be on the iPad or their phone or the computer. And this goes for video games too. It's still screen time. So there's a lot of those, we'll say diagnostic, words that are being used in conjunction with screen time.
Feeling anxious, stressed, or overwhelmed? Join local Montgomery County author and animal-assisted therapist Analisa Smithson for a 21-day journey of compassionate, playful self-discovery. Readers will relish this timely, easy-to-digest pilgrimage of self-love, which Smithson offers through 21 snack-sized chapters that can be easily digested before breakfast. Unconditional: Learning to Love Your Authentic Self is available now on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and hardback versions. Get your copy today. Go to AnnalisaSmithson.com for more information or find Unconditional on Amazon.
I have been concerned about this issue for a while, not just for myself, but for my 9-year-old daughter. And I started doing some research on how much time are we actually spending specifically on Facebook for me. For my daughter, it's more like YouTube. So one of the numbers that I kept coming across was that on average, users are spending 50 minutes a day on Facebook. And it's not a consecutive, like you're sitting down from 1 to 150. It's 2 minutes here, 5 minutes there. It's like sucking these little bits of time away from you. And I think that I have more like 8 to 12 hours a week on Facebook. So having tried to pay attention to it in recent months. And I just decided that that was taking too much time away from my opportunities to go outside and get some fresh air, or to pause and ask my daughter, what you watching on YouTube? Or just, I don't know, just to sit with my own thoughts. So I researched and I found something called the light phone, which back in the day we would have called a dumb phone, right? All it does is text and call, and it has a couple of useful tools on it, directions, music, podcasts. But what it doesn't have is any social media feeds. And I was like, all right, I thought about it all summer, researched it all summer, finally decided to take the plunge, and I lasted less than a day. Less than a day. I was like, I can't do this. And I even still had Facebook on my computer, right? And all the other social media feeds. I still had them on my computer, but there was something about not having it in my pocket anymore that just felt so disconnecting. And part of that is that my best friend / my sister lives in California and I live in Pennsylvania. So not having like instant access to my sister was really hard. But also it was too big of a change for me. So I went back to my smartphone, and now I'm thinking about other ways to be a more skillful user of all these different social media feeds. One of the things that I wanted to point out was that day that I was without my smartphone, I went onto the computer, I logged onto Facebook, And I'm gonna let you guess how long it took for me to come across something that made me noticeably feel worse.
I'm gonna take a guess of like a minute, because I know with like anytime I go on Facebook, those algorithms got it down. Like you just literally have to just do like one quick scroll up, and then all of a sudden it's like everything. Either it's some sort of advertisement or a news thing, or it's a statement or something made by somebody.
Yeah, that's a good guess. It took 5 seconds for me to see something that made me noticeably feel worse, right? Because there was a notification, someone had commented on one of my comments. It was a troll or a bot or something that was mean, right? And I'm 40 years old. I can handle a couple of trolls on the internet, but why was I doing that to myself, right? Why was I logging onto Facebook less than a day after I decided not to spend as much time there? Because it's an addictive pattern of behavior, right? Every time you see one of those like little red numbers telling you have messages or whatever, it gives you that little dopamine dump, like, ooh, I got a message, and you open it up and you read it, and it feels good. There's other ways to make myself feel good. So I'm not trying to break up with screens. I'm not trying to break up with social media, but I just want to be more skillful in my use of them. So I'm wondering if the two of you have any suggestions, like how can people be more skillful users of various types of screens?
We talked a little bit about like kiddos and electronics, kids, and you go out to a restaurant and mom and dad have three kids and they each have an iPad in their hands, waiting for their food. um for us, for as adults, it's a little different, right? Because our brains are fully developed, we're past that point. So the screens are more so part of our daily lives, like we said, with work and keeping in touch with loved ones. But is it, is there more of a risk in the kids, using all these electronics? That it's something that I think about a lot, when I see, kids on a train, on an iPad, or again, in a restaurant. And when I was a kid, that wasn't, obviously that wasn't a thing. We didn't have that. We didn't have electronics to play with, like while we waited. And a lot of the time it really does like hold their interest, and if like a kid is freaking out on an airplane, and their dad hands them an iPad with, loaded up with Cocomelon, it's like it does wonders for them. So it's like, where's the line when it comes to like children and adolescents and devices and screen time?
So I definitely think that the intentionality and also boundaries with electronics comes into play. So one thing that like you were saying, because we are such a technologically like invested culture, there are times, yeah, like I've seen the same thing where the iPad tends to be the pacifier instead of a pacifier, right? And so in that sense, sometimes kids want to be on screens, and I'm talking like young kids, because they are modeling what they're seeing. And so if one of the things that you want to do is lessen your child's screen time, modeling them, not modeling for them what that you want them to do. So okay, if you notice that when you are sitting on the couch, you are immediately taking your phone out and looking at stuff, and then, your kid's then asking for the iPad, and you're like, oh, go play outside, like maybe that's like a time to be like, okay, in this designated time of this day, we are going to do a screen free like hour or two. And so we do an activity, or we go outside, or we play make believe, like anything like that, where it takes time out of the screen, and also you doing something that is not on a screen. And so a lot of times the thought of do as I say, not as I do, comes up. but we really model a lot of behavior for our kids. And so that's one way. Another thing that I had mentioned earlier is putting timers on screens. So if we're talking about an older child where maybe you're getting into a situation of they're supposed to be doing their homework and they're immediately getting on social media, or they're getting on their game when they come home from school. A lot of those things are ways that are to kind of come down from being in a classroom all day, but also can look a little bit different. So, maybe that is when that screen time is put in. Maybe there's a timer of, hey, this hour you can't get on social media. And so this is homework time. You're able to access Google, or you're able to access Blackboard, or whatever the platform is for your school to get your homework. And then after that time is done, you're able to get on some sort of social media or what have you. Or, there's so many different patterns that can be put into place when it comes to those kinds of guidelines. Also, a rule book or code of conduct, if you will, that's written as a family, or written between you and your child, could be helpful. So it's something that's hung up that is talking about the expectations of the phone, or the screen. And it also brings up opening a dialogue with your kid about what they're doing on their phone that is exciting. I've heard a lot in conversations between parents and kids that, well, I'm listening to music and that's something that helps me relax. And then from parents' point of view, it's you're using your phone a lot and you're looking at your phone and you're doing all these things. And not to say that when you're listening to music, you can't do anything else, but maybe in that code of conduct, it is, I am using my phone strictly for music at this time. Or I'm listening to music aloud. I mean, not at a loud decibel, but like aloud, so that you're seeing the intentionality of using the phone for music and not to look at social media. It can also look like, during homework time, phones are in this location. Hour before bed, phones go in this basket. Or if we are having dinner, phones don't come to the table. So having some boundaries in that respect can also be really helpful.
Yeah, so River absolutely loves her phone. And when I say her phone, it's an old phone of mine that only has like Wi-Fi access. She doesn't actually have a phone number with data as a 9-year-old. But I feel like that's a pretty subtle, like the fact is she still has access to a phone more or less whenever she wants it. But I do have an app set up on it so that it limits the amount of time she can use it each day, and it shuts it off at a certain time at night. So during the summer, it's easier to be lax on those rules. And so she and I were talking about it the other day, and I was saying, I'm a little concerned for like getting you back into the swing of things for the school year. Your bedtime's been a little later. You've been using a little bit more of your phone. And she said, oh, well, why don't we use the 3-2-1 rule? I was like, what's the 3-2-1 rule? And she said, 3 hours before you're ready for bed, you stop working or studying. 2 hours before bed, you no longer do any errands or activities, like leaving the house to do activities. And 1 hour before bed, you shut down all the screens. And I was like, where'd you learn that? She's like, I don't know, like on YouTube or something. And I was like, I think that's a really neat idea. Would you like to do that? And she's like, yeah, let's do that. So like it was her decision to set this like wonderful boundary up. And my partner and I, we both agreed to honor it as well. Right. So 3 hours before her bedtime, like we all walk away from any more work or anything else that we have to do. Right. 2 hours where we're like, all right, errands are done. We're going to stay inside and have dinner and play. And we've been playing more board games and just being silly together. It's actually been pretty wonderful for our family relationships. I guess that's all we have for today. Thanks so much for listening. Tune into our next Unconditional podcast.
At some point. We'll see you when we see you.
to talk about something.
Yeah, we never know. Bye.